Hey, what's up? Zach here, and these are the 5 biggest lies about barefoot training. Now, the concept of barefoot training is nothing new. I mean, Abhi Bikala was in the 1960 Rome Olympics running barefoot, and that's kind of where the first big boom of it came, like when everyone could actually see it, there was actually newspaper reports of it. And then 70s, 80s, right? That's kind of when the cushioned, jogging type culture started coming about, and you started to see barefoot training not kind of pushed completely to the side, but it wasn't as popularized. And now you're starting to see a resurgence of it, right? Just in online forums, people talking about it online, just much more, companies, dedicated companies to barefoot training are popping up. And so it's just becoming, the trend is coming back and people are just pushing it to the forefront. The concept though is really nothing new. The thing is like in the 60s and now, there are still some generalizations out there that do not apply to everybody that to me are kind of myths and lies about barefoot training that you need to know about before you actually go out there and think it's going to solve all of your problems, because it is great for a lot of people, and barefoot training I think is awesome. Like I said, these are the 5 things you have to know before you decide you want to start doing it. And also the 5 things you need to know if your feet are currently killing you because you just started barefoot training. So let's get into it. All right, so let's start with lie number 1, and that's that barefoot training wearing barefoot shoes will fix any foot deformity like a flat arch or a bunion or a hammer toe. Now the bunion thing specifically to me is interesting because people talk about allowing your toes to splay in the shoes. And that is true. Most modern day running and court shoes do not allow a ton of toe splay. And that is for a reason. It's to keep your foot secure in the shoe so you can go side to side and not shear all over the place. Now, a bunion is caused by the first metatarsal, this bone right here, shifting outward on what's called the medial cuneiform. It's one of your midfoot bones. And then what happens is then the big toe starts to buckle in. And that's what causes a bunion. Now in barefoot shoes, or people that try to stretch their big toe out, a lot of them will be successful because they just have more pliable tissues, right? They just do it so often. And so as this big toe starts to push out, like if you do a ton of stretching with your toes, toe spacers, barefoot training all the time, that big toe will start to push back out. The thing is the bunion will still be there. It's just you're not seeing it as much because the foot is actually just becoming as wide as the bunion is. And so that's what you're really seeing there. The thing with bunion deformities is that this joint complex here just becomes adapted. There is no way to push it back in without actually planing off the joints or scraping it out with a curette and physically moving it back. That's why most bunion surgeries that are successful long-term involve fusing this joint back here. But usually what I see is that if they are getting some flexibility here, and their bunion looks smaller, it's because the bunion is still there. The big toe is just starting to stretch out to kind of meet it. So honestly, you're making your foot even wider then, so it's going to be harder to wear traditional shoes even more than that. And that's why people say, I went to barefoot shoes and then I just couldn't wear a regular shoe. That's because your foot actually did get wider over time, and so now it is even harder to wear one. Now, if that's good for you, if you like that feeling of your foot like that, then that is fantastic. But it's not, quote unquote, it's not gonna fix this joint, right? This is a structural abnormality of the foot. The other thing that I hear is that it's gonna fix a flat foot, right? Or a flat arch. Now, yes, barefoot training can beef up the intrinsic muscles of your foot, the abductor hallucis, the flexor digitorum brevis, maybe the adductor hallucis and the abductor digiti minimi, maybe. It'll get those to the point where you see a little bit more puffiness underneath the arch. And so, yes, you can fix some flat feet to some degree with barefoot training. And a lot of times when you're moving the big toe over, right, that bowstringing actually makes the arch just a little bit higher, makes it look a little bit higher. But if you do have a flat foot where your talus just is set in a position, your heel bone is just everted to a certain position, right? You just have loose ligaments, there is no way you can train away a ligament issue. Like I said, you can beef up the arch a little bit and maybe make your arch a little bit more resilient so it's not as tired all the time, but it is not going to just structurally fix the problem that over time your body has simply adapted to. And honestly, some people with flatter feet don't want them fixed because remember, a lot of times that flat foot is compensating for something else up the chain. And so a lot of times Some people that want cosmetic foot surgery done, their feet are flat and they want them fixed, their feet will then look like they have an arch, which may or may not look better to you, but then all of a sudden they start getting shin splints, or they start getting knee pain, or their hips really hurt, or their back starts killing them. Same with bunion surgery. See, a lot of people want to get cosmetic bunion surgery and their bunions are not causing any pain whatsoever. All of a sudden they get it fixed and the surgery looks beautiful and everything looks great. The surgeon did a good job, but all of a sudden it's killing them. Their joint now is not moving the way their body wants it, or they have pain up the chain, or their ankles start. There's all sorts of things that I've seen where you get surgery and it's a complete calamity. So a lot of times that deformity, quote unquote, is a compensation for something else up the chain. That's why before you would go try to fix anything or try to change anything, you should talk to somebody and get an exam, at least a biomechanical exam, just to see what is going on up the chain. Yes, it might be very beneficial for you to treat it, especially if you're having pain from it, obviously. But if you're having no pain, you're performing just fine and great, then it is worth talking to somebody before instituting any sort of treatment, whether that be barefoot training or whether that be especially surgery, because I could do a whole other video on the lies that you're told about, corrective foot surgery. All right, that was a long one. But number 2, and that is that everybody should do barefoot training or wear barefoot shoes. The thing is you already do barefoot training every day probably, unless you wear shoes all the time. As soon as you kick shoes off, right, you're barefoot training, right? You're walking around bare feet. And I try to walk around my house in bare feet. I mean, I try to lift weights barefoot as much as I can. Sometimes people can't, but that's a whole other thing. But there are only certain people who can barefoot train without pain, right? A lot of people with very, very high arches can't do it. People that have a hereditary loss of fat in their foot, that don't have any insulation or, really any padding on the bottom, simply can't do it. There's just too much shock up the leg. People that, don't have a lot of time to give barefoot training really shouldn't do it, because you do need to slowly build that up or you will get a stress fracture. There are only certain people out there that they just jump right into barefoot training. I mean, that is the exception, not the rule. I tell you, in my office, I see at least, monthly, a couple times a month, where someone has tried to go into barefoot training and stress fractures, or is starting to get plantar fasciitis or a neuroma or bursitis or just some sort of other debilitating foot issue because they either tried it too fast or they had a deformity in their feet that just would not allow it. Like something like congenital posterior tibial tendon dysfunction, just things that, where they just born like this and there is no way they're going to train it away. They need to be on the opposite end of the spectrum in orthotics and more supportive shoes. And they were told that barefoot training would change that, and they gave it 4 to 6 months, and now they're even worse off. So once again, start slow if you're going to do it. Like I said, I think most people can benefit from it given the right circumstances, and I have videos on this. But if you're going to institute it slowly in your training block, and make sure that you are at least getting information from an expert in whatever you're doing. So say you're gonna play basketball and train barefoot. Go to a basketball coach and have them evaluate your form while you're doing it, so you're not amplifying bad habits or amplifying things that are going to hurt you. The benefits are great, but you gotta be able to handle it. All right, now lie number 3 is one I talk about all the time, especially in my clinic, and that is that going barefoot is natural. So it is therefore safe, or that, that we were meant to walk barefoot. Now, that is technically true, except that that's on sand, dirt, soft earth, and tundra. We obviously don't walk on that as much anymore. We're on asphalt, cement, and concrete. Now, if you're walking on bare earth, right, or on sand all the time, then sure, barefoot is probably the way to go. I mean, that's what your foot had adapted to do, to stalk prey and things like that, to hunt and to be silent, to adapt to those surfaces. And that's all well and good. And so if that's where you're at, then yeah, barefoot is fine. It's just that asphalt, cement, and concrete, were not around during the time of early humans, during that adaptation. And so there's nothing really natural about those surfaces. There's really nothing natural about a tennis court, right? Or a pickleball court, even a basketball court made of hardwood, right? There's still underlayment under there. I mean, you're still playing, it's still not completely a natural surface, right? And your feet were not meant to dunk right? Like I don't know of any cave drawings, right, where someone's dunking on somebody else, right? So that's kind of where cushioned running, you know, cushioned basketball, tennis, that's where those shoes started to come into play, is to try to make asphalt, cement, and concrete feel more like natural surfaces. That's where we got polyurethane foams, EVA foams, thermoplastics. Now I'm not so sure. I don't know about any sand that acts like a thermoplastic. So that is kind of unnatural, and I'll give you that. But most foams during the jogging boom and the cushion shoe boom were trying to recreate those natural surfaces. Yes, nowadays we're getting artificial foams that are causing a lot of shock up the leg and a lot more bounce effect. And so there are issues with those for sure, and I've talked about them a lot. You just have to kind of delineate what is natural, what is normal for your circumstance. So I think that's the biggest thing, is what is normal, what is most advantageous for the circumstance. Because if it's in basketball, you don't want your foot completely splaying out all the time, every time, or you're gonna start shearing too much. You're not gonna be able to cut side to side. Yes, it is good to be able to use those toes and to get purchase and be able to grab it and to get more proprioception. And that's why barefoot training is great in a training block, but maybe not all the time. That's the thing, it's not all the time everywhere. Training, I mean, you see LeBron James lifts weights in barefoot shoes too. He trains barefoot. You know, you should. And that's not saying you should never barefoot train on non-natural surfaces. I think barefoot training blocks are fantastic, especially in sports that you don't necessarily, you know, always think to barefoot train with, like pickleball, tennis, basketball, volleyball. It can really show you some discrepancies, you know, in your footwork. And I think it's great for training blocks, but not all the time in every circumstance. You have to figure non-standard surfaces or movements require something to adapt your foot to that surface. That's why a lot of basketball shoes are made, or tennis shoes or pickleball shoes are made with tapered lasts so that your foot stays contained and can cut side to side. Same with running shoes. They're trying to get you through your gait cycle as quickly and efficiently as possible on a very unforgiving surface. And that's why they're like that, to get you through that faster. Now, of course, barefoot training for those circumstances is going to strengthen your feet, is going to strengthen your legs, but maybe not every single time, all the time, right? There's times and a place. There's a reason why you see people like LeBron James wearing barefoot shoes sometimes and then wearing his standard shoes for games, because there's a difference between training block and your regular everyday shoe. All right, so lie number 4 is that regular shoes will make your feet weak. Now, I'll give it to you. From the time you came out of the womb until now, you were wearing a super high stacked, incredibly supportive plastic shanks everywhere, incredibly, you know, resilient thermoplastic foams all the time. Then you went to go walk barefoot. Yeah, it's gonna be bad. But most people are only wearing their performance shoes while they are performing. The rest of the time, either they are in slippers, sandals, you're walking barefoot, everything. Your feet are adapting to what they're doing at all times. You know, a lot of times you need the support of shoes to even perform certain sports like basketball, tennis, pickleball, volleyball, running. Be able to perform those to a certain degree. If you did them barefoot, you'd only be able to perform a certain amount of time, right? You wouldn't be able to train as much as you do, so you wouldn't be able to train the rest of your body up. So no, in certain circumstances, regular shoes actually allow you to strengthen your feet more. And that's why a lot of people need orthotics to put their feet in a more optimal position to actually be able to train it, versus, you know, some people, like I said, with congenital deformities, where if they try to train them more and more, they're just going to overuse one specific part of that foot because they have such a deformity, whereas the orthotic actually corrects that deformity a little bit while you're in the orthotic, not permanently, but while you're in the orthotic, to allow you to train the rest of your foot. So sometimes barefoot training can actually make your foot a little bit weaker because you are overloading the one strong tendon or muscle that's overloading everything else. That's why a lot of athletes wear, or most athletes wear, orthotics, to try to balance that out. So they're actually using all the muscles effectively in their foot, right, when they're supposed to fire. And the last slide kind of wraps this all into one bow, and that's that you have to choose a side. And I see this a lot now, like especially like with tennis and pickleball players, like you have to choose a side, right? You have to like one versus the other. Whereas like same thing with like barefoot versus like traditional shoes, like it's like some people like think you're almost a bad person if you wear a traditional shoe, where most people should be doing both. Like I mean, the uncivilized sneaker, I mean, I absolutely love this thing. And I think most people should at least give it a try, right? You should at least try it, or at least see what happens. because like I said, it really will unlock a lot of things for you. You know, you don't need to feel bad about yourself if you just simply can't do it, right? If you're just not able to barefoot train or you don't like barefoot shoes, that says nothing about weakness in your body or anything else, right? That says nothing else about you. You could still be a fantastic athlete. And so I think if more people started embracing the hybrid model of, you know, using barefoot training, but also traditional shoes, you'd see more people adopting barefoot training and seeing the vast benefits of it as well. But I'd love to know your thoughts in the comments down below. What benefits have you seen from barefoot training? What issues have you seen from barefoot training? Do you think I'm completely wrong? Because I'm sure there's gonna be all those comments that I'm a shill for the shoe industry and this and there, I'm an industry plant and this and that, which of course is complete nonsense. If you look at my last barefoot training video where I answer kind of a lot of the questions I get in my office about barefoot training, I'll leave that linked right here. It's a longer video. If you look at that video, in the comment section, you'll see, you know, completely different responses on every single comment. So I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments down below. And like I said, if you do want to check out that video, I'll leave it linked right here. So make sure you click into that video above and subscribe down below. See you in the next video.